Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update. Join the only official Telegram channel of RAU'S IAS Study Circle to get relevant material and important updates.
Hello everyone and welcome to Daily News Simplified Sunday edition, your one-stop solution to detailed analysis of current affairs which are published in the Sunday edition of the Hindu newspaper and the entire week of Indian Express Explained section. Articles taken from the Indian Express Explained section this week are displayed on the screen right in front of you. And this timestamping of these articles is already given in the description box. So let us begin with the first article for the day. So the first article for today's discussion was published on 30th of November 2021 in Indian Express Explained section. And this article deals with the recent controversy where 12 opposition members of parliament have been suspended for rest of the winter session in Rajya Sabha. And they were suspended for creating disruption during the previous monsoon session. The cause which was mentioned in the House was that they were suspended for creating the unprecedented act of misconduct, contemptuous, unruly and violent behavior and international attack on the security personnels. And because of these nuisances that were created inside the House during the monsoon session, these 12 members of parliament from the opposition were suspended. Now, when it comes to the controversy of this article, it is not relevant for a UPSC aspirant to go into the political aspect of why opposition and ruling party is fighting. For UPSC examination, it is important for you to go through the relevance of suspension of member of parliament and basic understanding of the parliamentary proceeding, because this could clearly be asked in the mains examination and to be specific in the prelim examination in the coming year. The relevance of this article comes from the fact that in the prelim examination, many parliamentary proceedings may be asked directly by the UPSC. In the mains examination, parliamentary and the state legislations, including the structure, functioning, conduct of business, powers and privileges and other issues are important for your general studies paper 2. In this, conduct of business will be the target for today's discussion. The content for this article would include the powers of the presiding officers in relation to the suspension. We will also look into some of the rules of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha in this regard. Well, as far as India's parliamentary proceeding is concerned, both the houses, that is Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha, have their respective rule books. And these rule books define the proceedings as well as the conduct of a member of parliament inside the parliament house. Under these rules, each member is guided to maintain the decorum and sanctity of the temple of democracy. And for this reason, these are the following activities which are completely prohibited on the part of a member of parliament. It includes the interrupting of the speech of the member who is speaking, including the minister of the government. It includes shouting the slogans which may be derogatory in nature and language. Displaying of the placards, tearing up the document in protest, and play a cassette or a tape recorder inside the house in one way or the other. So, if any member of the house attempt to practice any of these prohibited activities inside the house, what is the option available to the presiding officer? Well, there are two stages in which an action could be taken up against these errant member of parliament. The first one, or the stage 1 action, is that the presiding officer of each house, that is chairman and the speaker, can direct the member of parliament to withdraw from the legislative chamber for grossly disorderly conduct. It simply means that the chairperson or the presiding officer will tell the errant or the nuisance creating member of parliament to leave the house immediately. And the member of parliament who has been ordered to move out will remain absent for the proceeding of the house for remainder of the day. That is only limited to one single day. On the other hand, there is second stage, when the presiding officer can name a member of parliament for persistently and willfully obstructing the business. Let's say a member of parliament on first stage was ousted on the first day, and he remained absent for the rest of the day. But next morning, when he came to the house, he started creating the same thing, same nuisance in the house, disrupting the precious proceeding of the parliament. But because of this, now he has created a nuisance time and again, and he has become a repeated offender in the House of Parliament. In that case, the presiding officer will allow the Parliamentary Affair Minister, and in this case, Parliamentary Affair Minister will move a motion for suspending the offending member of Parliament from the service of the House. And this suspension is very long. The suspension can last until the end of the session. So if a member is, let's say, suspended on the first day of the meeting, that person will remain suspended for rest of the session, and the session could go for even 2 months. So that is the condition how it is being practiced in both these houses. Under the rule 255 that talks about the withdrawal of a member, and this rule is part of the general rule of procedure for Rajya Sabha. The chairman, that is, the presiding officer of Rajya Sabha, may direct any member whose conduct in his opinion, see the word is his opinion, not the opinion of the House, not the opinion of the administration, and not the opinion of the Parliamentary Secretariat. So, if the chairman in his own opinion considered that a member has grossly disorderly, has created a nuisance inside the house, will be held liable to remain absent for rest of the day. Simply means Rule 255 provide the power to the chairman in Rajya Sabha to kick out the nuisance creating member of parliament in the Rajya Sabha. On the other hand, Rule 256 provide the power to the chairman to suspend the member for remainder of the session. However, when it comes to the remainder of the session, in this case, a motion should be passed from the Parliamentary Affair Minister. On the other hand, if we talk about the Lok Sabha, Rule 374A of General Rules of Procedure provide additional power to the Speaker, in which he can immediately suspend a member of parliament for 5 days without any motion. This rule was added in 2001, and because of this rule, Speaker has more power than the chairman of Rajya Sabha. And this reason has created more disciplined outcome in the Lok Sabha, and it is desirable to bring this kind of provision in the Rajya Sabha as well. Rajya Sabha chairman does not have the power to suspend a minister immediately for 5 days or more. And this is the reason why most of the chairmen of Rajya Sabha, including the current vice president, has called for bringing reforms in the suspending powers of the presiding officer in the Council of State. As far as way forward is concerned, well, what we need to have a debate. We need to know that debate is central to the democracy, and it should continue with fewer or no disruption. The ruling party should take the opposition party in the governance procedure it is going through. So more confidence the opposition has in the ruling party, there is less likely to have disruptions in the long term. The opposition should also play the constructive role, not only the destructive or the disruption role in the parliament, and allow to put forward the views and express of itself in the dignified manner. And lastly, the presiding officer must also help the opposition in raising the issues uncomfortable to the government. In most of the case, what we find that when there is an issue which is not acceptable to the government in the public sphere, government either does not allow that to be raised in the parliament, or if it allows that to be raised in the parliament, the speaker or the presiding officer take the side of the government and they deny the basic right to speak to the member of parliament for further discussion on the controversial issues. And this is the reason why most of the members of the parliament get irritated and they conduct some illegal and non-dignified activities. In order to solve all these things, we need a better coordination between both opposition and the ruling party. With this discussion in place, now I will leave you with this important prelims related question. So solve these questions and answer in the comment box. Let us move to the next article for the day. So the next article for today's discussion was published in the Indian Express Explained section on December 1st. This article talks about the recent statement which came through the publication of second quarter of GDP data in India. The context says that the economy from this data shows that it is in the recovery stage from the previous recession which we were facing due to COVID-19 pandemic. However, the recovery is only the beginning, and the GDP GVA data or the layer levels or their levels are still far away from the V-shaped recovery. As per the statement published by the government, the second quarter GDP rate was 8.4% year on year. If you are writing mains this year, well, this could be the potential point which you can mention if there is any question in your general studies paper 3 economy section, that too dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic and its after effects. The relevance of this article comes from the fact that such kind of data which is published regularly by the government is important as through the terms and data for the Indian economy. In the mains examination, this kind of trend is important for your growth and development section in general studies paper 3. The content for today's discussion would include the observations which were published through this GDP data, what will be the implication of this publication, and what are the different types of recovery, including the K-shaped and the V-shaped recovery after the pandemic. So let us look into what the observation was all about. Private consumption, according to the data released by the government, private consumptions amount 55% of the all GDP. For those people who are unaware of the GDP formula, well, as far as expenditure method is concerned, if you go through the basic NCERT, you will find that GDP equals. So GDP according to the expenditure method include C plus I plus G plus X minus M, where C is your consumption expenditure by the household sector, most specifically. I is the investment made in the economy from the private sector. G is the government expenditure or the government spending in the economy. X is the amount of income that country is earning by exporting something outside the nation, and M stands for the total imports. Well, as you can see, C according to this data or the private consumption contribute about 55% of the GDP, which itself shows that highest level of India's GDP is coming from the demand section in the economy. So Indian economy is a demand driven economy, not the investment driven economy. So if demand in the economy is low, it means the GDP is also going to be low, which we have seen in the case of 2020 and half of 2021 when the pandemic was in its peak. So private consumption, which contributes about 55% of the all GDP, is the biggest engine of growth in India, and this consumption grew by 8.6% when compared to the last one. However, this is less than what was expected around to be 10%. So the baseline is that the private consumption in India has not achieved the position it was supposed to achieve when comparing it to what we were going through in 2019 and the period before. The investment made by the private sector, that is the I section of the GDP, which is the second biggest engine of GDP growth in India, contribute about 33% or the 1/3 of the all GDP in India, and it has increased by 11%. You are not required to remember these data, but the trend is important, which says that both private consumption as well as the investment is increasing in the country. Private consumption has more share in the GDP than the investment. So together both of these constitute 88% of the GDP. As we have seen in the last 1 year, government expenditure was at the extreme level. And this is one of the reasons why the fiscal deficit of India was very high, if you go through the budget estimates this year. But the government expenditure in the last 5 years have been very low, as you can see from the data. So 88% is coming from the investment and the consumption. So rest 12% is devoted from the contribution of the government expenditure if we are keeping the exports and import out of the scenario. But the real issue is that the creating of fresh jobs, not the people who were already employed. We want to create fresh jobs for the new workforce which is coming into the economy. There are four sectors which are not showing any good sign as far as expansion of the economy is concerned. These sectors include mining and quarrying, construction, services such as trade, hotel, and all financial services. So if these four sectors also come into picture to bring the higher demand in the economy as well as the investment, India's GDP growth will be much higher than what we are expecting right now. So what we are seeing, we are observing that some sectors are growing in a very impressive stage, while there are other sectors including mining, hotel, finance, trade and others which are not growing to the considerable level. As you can see in the formula which we have mentioned here, GDP equals the gross value added plus taxes earned by the government minus the subsidy provided by the government. In the last 1 year, what we have seen, because of the higher rate of taxation, both GST as well as the excise duty which is imposed on the petroleum product, and because of this higher contribution of the taxation by the government, GDP automatically increases more. Hence, most of the time it is preferred that government should focus more on the gross value added, because gross value added does not include the inclusion of taxation. Because GDP may look like very impressive, but because of the higher taxation, it could be deceptive. And that is the reason why GVA is preferred over GDP. So you have to have some basic idea about these two important contributions and the current status of this GDP data. If we go on the implication of the current scenario, well, India is recovering, but this recovery is still fledgling. A V-shaped recovery would have required the second quarter GDP to be much higher, even higher than the 10%. But what was the current status? Current status is only 8.4%. From that data, we can say that V-shaped recovery is not yet there for India. The threat for the future business investment if the private consumption remains weak or constrained. So if people are not going into the market, people are very reluctant to buy products in the market. It simply means that the consumer demand is low. When the consumer demand is low, it simply means that the confidence shown by the business class is also low. So people will not set up shops, people will not set up businesses, they will not produce products for the consumer. And when businesses are very low, the investment also becomes low. So in that scenario, both consumption demand, which contribute 55% of the GDP, and the investment demand, which contribute 33% of the GDP, goes in the downward trend. And as you know, when both these majority contributors go in the downward trend, the entire GDP also goes into the downward trend. So what is expected? So when both these sectors are at the dismal stage, it is expected from the government to come forward and spend aggressively and boost the overall demand. However, government has its own restrictions, because government does not have enough money to spend in an infinite manner. Because if they do, it will cause the inflationary pressure that will hurt the poor class to a larger extent. So if government starts providing the investment to the aggressive level, it will create the crowding out of the private investment, because more funding by the government in the economy will raise the rate of interest, because government is going to borrow it from inside the economy, and higher rate of interest kill out the private investment as such. Well, that is the reason why India is not as of now going through the V-shaped recovery. So what to do? Well, boosting the consumer demand through the lower interest rate and tax incentive. Well, lower interest rate here simply means the functioning of monetary policy, and tax incentive means the functioning of fiscal policy. If both these policies work together, we will be in a position to raise the consumer as well as investment demand in the economy. Now, after this discussion, we should be in a position to understand what is K-shaped recovery. As you can see, this was the stage 1, which is prior to the COVID-19 crisis, that is 2019. During COVID-19 crisis, or in the stage 2, India went through the negative GDP growth rate for 2 consecutive quarters, which simply means that India was in state of recession. And after the lowering down of the restrictions of the COVID-19, there is a clear-cut recovery which we are observing. But there is a K-shaped recovery. As you can see, there are 2 divergences of the recovery in the different sectors. So there are industries like technology, retail, software industries which are recovering very fast. On the other hand, there are travel, entertainment, hospitality, food services, tourism, and they are recovering very slow. And this divergence in the different sectoral economic growth has created the dichotomy for the government as well as the policy makers in the time to come. On the other hand, we are expecting a V-shaped recovery. Well, this is where India was during 2019. So this is just a hypothetical example. So do not venture into the details of the data. This is just a hypothetical representation. So let's say India was at this position during 2019, and because of the COVID crisis, India went down to very negative growth rate in 2020 and 21. So what India was expecting is that in 2022, India should get back closer to what it was observing in the past, or specifically during 2019 and period before. So as you can go through the entire structure of this diagram, you can easily say that the V alphabet of English language is visible from this graph. And this is what we call as V-shaped recovery. So this is what India was expecting, and this is what India is observing as of now. So given this discussion place, now I will leave you with this important question to attempt. So read this question carefully and try to answer this in the comment box. Let us now move to the next article for the day. So now we come to the last article for the day. This article of Indian Express Explained section was published on December 4th, that is yesterday. This article talks about the status of the parliamentary proceeding where MPs are allowed to question the government and the other members of the parliament. But recently, a question which was raised by the Rajya Sabha Member of Parliament Venugopalan listed for a reply has been removed. And previously, the same thing happened to the another Member of Parliament, Subramaniam Swamy. The relevance of this article comes from the fact that in the prelim examination, parliamentary proceeding for Indian polity is extremely important. In the mains examination, we will also look into the parliamentary proceeding related to the conduct of business, which is mentioned in the mains examination syllabus for your general studies paper 2. The content for this article's discussion would include pointers on the admission of a question in the parliament, types of questions which could be asked in the parliament, and the restrictions which are imposed as far as content and permission of a question in the parliament is concerned. Well, when we go through the entire process in both the houses enjoying their right to speak, each member of the parliament has right to seek information from various ministries as well as departments. In order to do that, every member of parliament can make his or her own list. This list goes through the rigorous process of clearance before it is put up for discussion in the house. Admissibility of each question in Rajya Sabha is governed by the rules 47 to 50 of Rules of Procedure and Conduct of Business, and in Lok Sabha it is under the rules 41 to 44 under the same rules of procedure and conduct of business with respective house. After going through the entire process of scrutiny and fulfilling the conditions of admissibility, the parliamentary secretariat sent this kind of question list to the respective ministry for the further consideration. After a final process, these questions are put up in the parliament, and each question should be answered by the concerned minister representing a concerned department or a ministry. For answering these questions, every ministry or departments have been divided into 5 different groups, and they have been allotted different days, including Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday respectively. As far as types of question is concerned, I hope you all have studied this through your Lakshmikant book or any other specific book for the preparation. So just take it as a point of revision. If you are new to this preparation of UPSC, spend 2-3 minutes in understanding what these types of questions are and how they are put up in the parliament. So these are the different kind of questions which are put up by the member of parliament to the different ministers. The first one is the starred questions. They have an asterisk mark with them. The member desired an oral answer, so it is not a surprise to the minister. They already have the content prepared for answering these questions orally. Such question is distinguished by the member of parliament with an asterisk. The answer can also be followed by the supplementary question from the member. And that is the reason why they are starred. It is more like a defined, disciplined warning given to the minister that, sir, we can ask extra questions on the similar matter, so be prepared. On the other hand, we have unstarred questions. The MP can seek written answer to these questions, so there is no requirement of discussing this orally in the House. And as this is provided in the written format, no supplementary questions could be asked. So this is not a live one-to-one discussion in the parliament. Then we have short notice question. Short notice here simply means a notice which is shorter than 10 days. Normally a notice takes 14 days. It is put up for the urgent matter of public importance. So, if a member of parliament thinks that he or she is going through the urgent public matter in the country, so they can give this short notice question to the minister, and this will be discussed in the parliament in the earliest possible manner. In the parliament, questions could also be asked to the private members under Rule 40 of Lok Sabha and Rule 48 of Rajya Sabha. It simply means a question could be addressed to the private members also in relation to their respective constituencies or anything which is happening in that particular area. So let's say a private member or a member of parliament has tabled a specific bill. Let's say a bill related to the transgender. This was once asked by the UPSC in the prelim question as well. So if any member of parliament who is not part of the government, who is not a member of council of minister, has tabled a bill, so other members of the parliament can raise questions to this member of parliament in respect to that particular bill. First hour in the meeting is dedicated to the question hour, where this kind of question and conversations takes place. If we talk about the restrictions, well, admissibility of every question is decided by the presiding officers. So for Rajya Sabha, it is the chairman. For Lok Sabha, it is the speaker. The restrictions which are imposed in Rajya Sabha will include that the question shall be pointed and be specific, confined to one issue only. So if a member is asking too many questions under the same heading, that question or that entire concept can be denied. It shall not bring any particular name or a statement not strictly necessary to the question of intelligible. That means unnecessary information should be avoided in these kind of questions. If there is anything for which the member of parliament is holding himself responsible, such as the accuracy of statement or the accuracy of data, in that manner, that question may not be tabled. And lastly, it shall not contain the argument, inferences, ironical expressions, imputations, epithets or defamatory statements at all. If any question consists that kind of language which is derogatory to the parliament, it will be denied to be admissible. As far as Lok Sabha is concerned, any question which is repetitive or has already been answered previously will not be entertained. A matter which is already pending under the judgment of any particular court of law, let's say High Court or the Supreme Court, or which is already under the consideration of the Parliamentary Committee, such kind of questions will not be entertained at all in Lok Sabha. So apart from these particular ground, there are major other restrictions which are applicable not only to the parliament but in the general governance itself. So a member of parliament, if asked anything which is against the national security or which undermines the India's national security, will not be asked. Anything which undermines India's reputation in the international forum will not be asked. These kind of provisions are although rarely used, but they are also helpful in restricting the misuse of right to speech and expression by member of parliament. However, as of now, we have been observing that too much of restrictions have been imposed in these kind of questions which are put up for discussion. So, after this entire discussion, I leave you with this practice question. So, read this question carefully and try to answer in the comment box. With this, now we come to the end of today's DNS and I will leave you with question of the day.